Your story, by the way, is so freaking out there. If someone's pitched a movie and talked about the story, you'd be like, not believable. Number one, born into royalty in Nigeria. I know you're technically a prince. Then you ended up going to the Bronx at a very young age, just with your mom and your brother, and grew up extremely poor, got into crime. Of course, you went and then made it into the Navy SEALs. There's a whole process about that. And then you ended up in Hollywood in big action movies. And I don't think anyone in a million years would believe that. So now you fill in the story because you really lived it and are still living it, brother.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because everybody that has heard my story, read my book, I get messages every week like, I can't believe this is not a movie yet. This needs to be a movie. This needs to be a movie. We had everything. Silver spoon life, cars, nannies, drivers, your horses, with a compound. And this is what I was essentially born into. However, at the same time, there's a lot of corruption in Nigeria. It's been a very historically corrupt nation. My father bought a plot of land called Marico. And shortly after he bought it, it cost 8 million pounds. The Nigerian government took it from him. And he went to court for 10 years to fight them. A new political group got in power, and they recognized that my father was done wrong. And so they asked him, what do you want? And so my father asked for a lagoon. They gave it to him, and they essentially developed an island. After the land was fully developed, after my dad had started signing contracts, that's when the Lagos state government came in and said, you know what, the federal government never had the power to give you this. This belongs to us. Within weeks of that happening, my father died. He had a heart attack.
And how old were you now, Remi, when your dad died?
You're 5 years old, man. Yeah, this was 1987.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a young age to lose your dad.
Yeah. And my oldest son now is 6, and my middle is going to be 5 in 2 weeks. And so for me, this is an awesome time for me because it's like I'm now, my kids are now that age, older the age that I was, when my father passed away. So it's a very pivotal moment for me and my kids.
And they develop personalities. And I've one little boy. I have 3 girls and a little boy. My little boy is just about to turn 5.
Yeah.
And it's like you have a relationship all of a sudden. Like he's inquisitive. And he also holds you accountable. He's like, what you doing, Daddy? What are you doing, Daddy? Does Mom know you doing that? He'll miss some words. And you're like, dude, now we got a spy in the house too. Come on, man. Home team, brother. What's going on?
I know. That's my middle son all the way. He's always snitching on me. Always snitching on me.
So you all of a sudden, and your mom, I mean, man, she goes from everything to nothing overnight. You're too little to really understand that, but she's like, okay, we're going to get on a plane. We're going to go to this place called the Bronx.
Yeah. My mom did a great job of masking the reality of what had happened. She knew that she had to keep it together because if she didn't keep it together, then we would fall apart, and if falling apart, she would fall apart, and would create this never-ending cycle. And so the transition wasn't bad, as a matter of fact, I remember my mother told my father, brother and I that my father died, and she said it in such a calming way that we just went back to playing as if nothing happened. We just looked at each other and said, okay, we'll go back to play now. And then and again, that incident was a snapshot of how my mother always was: calm, cool, and collective, and not freaking out and not having a meltdown, but just keeping it together for the sake of her 2 boys now. And so I didn't really realize how hard we had it and how hard she struggled until about 3 years after my father's death, because I began to see things. I began to, my mother would give my brother and I a bar of Ivory soap and say, hey, go wash out your socks and your underwears in the sink because I don't have money to buy detergent. We would go to the rental office with my mother, and she would ask for extra, a few days to pay the bills, and she would stand in the doorway of the kitchen and watch my brother and I eat, and she wouldn't have enough food to feed herself. So as I got older and began to see these things, then I began to realize, we don't have the life that we had.
But what a transition. I mean, when you talk about, you went from royalty, and not just the title royalty, but the reality, like you said, nannies, cars, everything that was unimaginable, living in a mansion. And then, as you said, your mom is like the Rock, who's hiding the pain for her young kids.
Yeah.
So even as you're kind of evolving, because at 5 you don't know as much, your mom's seeing it. No one's doing your laundry. Instead of the staff doing your laundry, now
Yeah.
you're washing your underwear with a bar of soap.
Yeah.
But as you're getting older, you're growing up in the Bronx.
Yeah, right on the West Bronx. I'm so grateful for that environment. I would not be the man that I am if I didn't grow up in that environment. I would not. I don't think I would have accomplished things that I've accomplished so far. There was a period of time when I rebelled. I rebelled against my mother. I rebelled against authority. I rebelled against everything, and I tried to follow the trend at the time. And I found myself in conducting some pretty bad things. Carrying out illegal activities by selling drugs and running scams and doing all of these things. But
yeah, I'd heard that you had just, you had a cell phone scam where you were selling cell phones even to like drug dealers. And I know one time a drug dealer came back to your apartment door and was like, these phones were not as represented, my man. I want the money back.
He was very threatening and essentially saying, hey, if you don't give me my money, things are not going to go too well for you, and I knew what that meant, knowing his reputation. But you're spot on. I was, I was selling drugs, and then, I came to the realization that I need to do something else because it's just too risky. And cell phones had just kind of became the buzz, and average people were able to somewhat afford them. And so I was able to figure out a way to, we call them blow up phones, where we would illegally activate three cell phones, and then they would stay on for 90 days and selling to drug dealers, and they would just have them use them for 90 days, unlimited plan, because you got to remember this is the time when the cell phone plan was $29.99 a month, and you only got 30 minutes, and after that 30 minutes, you're paying like 25, 35 cents a minute, which is pretty expensive, and so I was offering people phones for unlimited cell phone plans before unlimited cell phone plans.
I was going to say, man, you got to reach out to John Ledger, the CEO of T-Mobile, or the former CEO, the guy with the wild hair, and saying, we're the first ones doing unlimited phone, unlimited data. You got to be like, no, man, Remi invented that on the streets in the Bronx long before you did. And you decided to get your way out. You wanted to join the Navy. You had some issues there because of your behaviors. And I saw in an interview you mentioned that there was a Navy recruiter who helped you get some warrants released. You get into the Navy, and then of all things, you decide that you want to go in the Navy, where if you wanted to pick a place where you might have the hardest time finding another black person, you picked the Navy SEALs.
There's not that many, less than 1%.
What percent, really? What percent of Navy SEALs?
It's less than 1%. Less than 1% of Navy SEALs are African American historically.
So now you're taking the Navy SEALs, which are the most elite, most difficult for anyone to get into to begin with, something like 75, 80% washout rate. But on top of that, you want to be within the 1% of all African Americans within that crazy statistic to begin with. And what the hell made you think you could do that, going from the Bronx and the streets and everything else? You watch too many movies.
Yeah, what made me believe I could do it was the Bronx. I lived a hard life, and my mother, she always instilled the importance of hard work within me. And whatever you do it right the first time. Whatever you do it with excellence. And so, having been raised the way I was raised, it was like I saw that mountain. I was like, I can climb that mountain. Everybody's like, no, you can't. It's a pop. I was like, no, I can do it. I can do it. So maybe I was naive at the time, but I felt like I had it within me to do it. I felt like, you know what, if other people could do it, they have not had as hard of a life as I had, and there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do it. And I was totally unqualified in that way to even get into SEAL training because I couldn't swim. I didn't have the academic scores, and I was super skinny. But, I just had this work ethic. I just, when I got to my first command, Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, I just put in the work. I just worked really, really hard every single day, 10 times harder than the average person, and that's eventually how I ended up getting in, but even now, there's things that I do now, especially working in the film and TV industry, where people are just like, man, you can't do that. It's going to be hard to do that. And in case in point, I just got hired, and I can't go into all the details about it, but I just got hired to co-write and a TV show, and people are like, well, there's no way you do that. You got to start off as a writer's assistant. Then you got to be a staff writer. Then you got to be this. And I didn't know that. I was just naive. I was just like, okay, baby. But now I'm creating this TV show and co-writing this TV show and being an EP of a show. And I never had experience doing any of these things. So that's just the way I've always lived my life. Like, I see a way when everybody else does not see a way, and I just figure out a way to get to where I need to be in order to get the job done. And that's how I ended up, getting in and eventually making it through training.
But first of all, you breezed over it because you're obviously a very humble guy, but we got to go back to even BUDS, which is the first part of Navy SEALs, basic underwater demolition SEAL training. We've had other SEALs on the show in the past. I've read a bunch of books by some of these amazing guys as well. That is freaking insane itself. I mean, during BUDS itself, which is just one part of this 6-month starting out point to become a SEAL, you experienced something called Hell Week. So talk about BUDS and Hell Week, what that was like for you coming from the Bronx. And
well, BUDS is just it's a kick in the nuts. It's considered the toughest military training on the man. And one of the things that I struggled with big time in BUDS was the water. Specifically like the cold water and doing a long 2-mile time ocean swims in the water. Because I had just learned how to swim when I got to SEAL training, and I didn't know that you had to swim with fins in the ocean for 2 miles once a week. Right? So here I am, this kid, like, jumping in the ocean and swimming and like not moving, even though I'm kicking as hard as I could. And the instructors expected me to quit. They were just like, there's no way this guy's gonna last, because at the end of every swim, I was either hypothermic or borderline hypothermic, Everything else I could deal with. I could take the beat downs. I could take the name calling. I could take the O course and runs and all that other stuff. But for me, the biggest struggle for me was the 2-mile time ocean swims. And I eventually, I made it to Hell Week. And what Hell Week is so back up for a second. You have about 3 to 4 weeks of BUDS. And then after those 3 to 4 weeks of BUDS, they're just beating the whole class down, getting rid of the guys who don't hack it. I mean, it's just a hammer session. After you make it through those first 3 to 4 weeks, then you go to Hell Week. And Hell Week is 6 days. It starts Sunday and it ends on Friday. And they keep you up for that entire time. You get 2 hours of sleep on Wednesday if you make it that far, and then you get 2 hours of sleep on Thursday, and it's nothing but straight torture.
So basically 4 hours combined sleep over 6 days, which 6 days, in many ways the brain can you're reaching a point where the brain can start to die at the end of that window if you even make it that far. You're hallucinating.
Yeah, for sure you die. Like I hallucinated a few times. I don't even know how I got from one point to another point, because everything I was just like outside of myself. I think it was a point where I saw myself. I was outside of myself and watching myself run down the demo pits on the sand. So yeah, it's not fun at all. And but it's a great program. It's a great evolution. That Hell Week evolution. It really shows you what you're made of. It really exposes people. It shows you the guys who they were half weighing it, or the guys who they really don't want to be there, and so it was and showing you who you are, what you have within you, and how far you can go. Like I didn't realize how far I can go in anything until I went through BUDS, and then Hell Week, and then I got to Tuesday of Hell Week the first time, and I got pneumonia, siphon, rhabdo, and almost died. I was in the ICU for like 4 or 5 days. And then after I get out the ICU, I get sent back to BUDS, and the instructor's like, hey, congratulations for pushing as hard as you could, man. We respect that you kept on going until you almost died. But guess what? You get to start from day one.
Day one.
So I went back to day one of BUDS, 4 weeks of first phase again, got kicked in the nuts over and over again, watched like 100+ guys quit again. And then I got to Hell Week and made it through Hell Week.
So you made it through phase 1, but in your group, phase 1, how many people started and how many people made it through phase 1?
I would say ballpark. I think we started with 250 guys. By the time we were done with Hell Week, I think we were down to like 45 guys, if my memory serves me right.
How many other black guys were in that group, either to start or at the end?
The first class I was in was only 3 black dudes. And by the end of Hell Week, there were 2 of us. Well, I had got rolled out, so there was 1 black dude left. And then when I went through, I was one of 2, me and Mark Lee.
So 2 groups in a row, there was only 1 black guy in each of 2 groups in a row that made it through first phase. Why do you think there are so few African Americans in the Navy SEALs, either going out for it to begin with or making it through?
I think it's a combination of things. I think one, there's not a lot of education as it relates to soft in inner cities and in areas where there are a lot of African Americans. I mean, the education system, in my opinion, is broken. Speaking for the Bronx, it's broken, and a lot of other inner cities. And when you don't get educated on what's out there, then you don't know what's out there, right? And then on top of that, if you don't have the resources in the area that you grew up in to acquire the skills that you need to acquire in order to get into the Navy, let alone get into SEAL training, it's not gonna happen. So I think like a lot of African Americans are phased out just because of where they start. And just using myself as an example, I didn't grow up around any pools.
Let's stop for a second. You can take swimmers who are seasoned athletes who swam competitively in high school, who maybe played water polo or swim in college. They're going to struggle if they can even complete a 2-mile ocean swim. Most would not be able to. And you'd never swam in your life. I'm guessing the Bronx where you grew up didn't exactly have an NCAA water polo team.
Yeah, there's no water polo in the Bronx. And again, that's what it all, and resource and educate. Like I told you, like when I first came in and wanted to be a SEAL, I was not qualified in 3 areas. One, couldn't swim. And again, part of that reason was there's no real swim resources in inner city, at least where I grew up, right? 2, the academics in schools are just so poor. I mean, it's just, they're underfunded. Books are torn apart. I mean, it's not conducive to learning, right? And so when you get a lot of kids who don't have a good shot at learning properly, they're not going to be able to pass the ASVAB. I have a friend of mine who's a recruiter now. We were in the Navy together, and he was in the Navy for a few years, and he jumped to Army, and now he's a recruiter for the Army in Philadelphia. And we spoke a few months ago, and he was just like, Remi, I can't get any of these kids in Philadelphia, in the city of Philadelphia, to get into the military. And they want to join the military for a better life, but they can't get in because none of them could read. Some of them can't read and write. Some of them, their reading is at such a low level, they can't pass the ASVAB.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
It really is heartbreaking.
But there's disproportion. At 1%, that's disproportion. And a lot of the reasons you've said, hopefully there are some solutions. So you make it through phase 1 kind of twice. Well, you went through it twice. You made it through once. You're in phase 2, which is dive phase. And most people write about that if you make it through phase 1, some people don't make it. Some people get drop out or get kicked out in phase 2 or 3. But usually it's a really strong sign after phase 1. You're so committed. They want you to make it if you can do what you need to. What happens in phase 2?
I get to dive phase, and there's a week in dive phase called pool week, and you have to do all of these different dive tests. One of them is go underwater with your dive tanks, and it's called ditch and don. You have to take off all your dive gear in the water, and then FSA to the top, which is, a procedure where you swim to the top properly so that you don't get a pulmonary gas embolism, and then you get to the top, and then you got to swim back down to your dive gear and put it all on in a proper format and in a proper sequence. And then the next test is night ditch and don, which is the same thing, but you do it on blacked out mask. Then there's buddy gear exchange, where you take off all your gear, and at the same time you and your buddy are sharing a mask, and you exchange the gear. And then night buddy gear exchange, where you do the same thing with a blacked out mask. And then there's pool con, where the instructors swim down to you, and they rip your hose out your mask, they tie out your mouth, they tie your hose in the knots.
They're trying to simulate drowning. That's part of the technique. Essentially, it's like a organized, chaotic way to try to simulate that.
Yeah, I think the most guys who have died so far have died from it's stuff in the pool. Right?
With all your swimming skills from the Bronx, not really. You made it through the first part, and you essentially get kicked out, kind of, right?
Yeah. So I get to the sixth test that I didn't mention is called the tread. And the tread is like, for me, that was hell. Because it's like you have on 280 dive tanks, which are 2 huge dive tanks on your back. You have on all this dive gear, and you got to tread water, keep your hands above water, and tread water for 5 minutes. And again, not having had the experience in the water, it was like I was drowning. Because as soon as your hands touch the water, you fail. So it's like you have all this weight on you and you're just kicking, and I didn't have the strength, and I'm swallowing water and I failed that 4 times. And I went to an academic review board, and they were just like, hey, you already got med roll for Hell Week. After Hell Week, we rolled you 2 classes to teach you how to swim. And then when I got to second phase, this was part of the story I didn't mention, I had failed my first 2-ton ocean swims. So I had failed those, and then I get to this point, and I failed the dive test 4 times. They kicked me out of training. So I got kicked out of training, went to 1st Marine Division, and did my time there, and then I came back a year and a half later.
And you made it through.
Made it through. Started day 1, though. Day 1 all over again.
So you went back to phase 1?
Day 1. Not just phase 1. Day 1. Day 1.
So
first phase.
A whole nother Hell Week, a whole nother first phase. So you went through 2.5 Hell Weeks. Yeah. I mean, and I've seen guys.
3-4 phases.
I've seen interviews with hardcore, badass mothers that you would not want to piss off in your worst dream. Seasoned combat SEALs, when they talk about buds in phase 1, oh, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad it was tough. No, I'd never want to redo it again. Never. Yeah. And you did it almost 3 times.
Yeah.
And that is.
I got full benefit.
That is resilience, brother, and then some. That defines it. And then, how about you did several tours? Where were you?
Yeah, I did a total of 3 deployments, and all of them were to the Middle East. I had 2 jobs in the teams. I had one was I was a medic, and then I was also a human guy. So I did the human intelligence stuff. So I can't go into details, but just intelligence. I'll just leave it there. And then I was in the teams until about 2016, and then I had 2 kids at this point, and I was just like, I gotta be home. My dad died when I was 5, and I want to be home as much as I can, and that's when I got out.
Man, and you saw some pretty, hardcore action. I mean, the time that you were in, you went into some of the hot zones that you were in. Things you can talk about, not the intelligence part.
Yeah. I did, snatch and grabs, direct action missions, been in firefights. I had a full career as a SEAL. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved it. For me, about the job the most was the guys I was able to work around, going on and off. I'll never forget this one time that this has been imprinted on my life, imprinted on my mind, be with me forever. And me and my platoon, we were getting ready to go on a mission to go after HVT, high value target. And it was 16 of us in the space getting briefed on this guy, and part of the situation was he was in this. Just think of the projects. He was in this compound that was like a project surrounded by a lot of bad dudes who worked for him. And after my OIC gave the brief, we all just looked at each other. It was just like, all right, what are we waiting for? You know what I mean? And the situation was like, if we got in a firefight, 16 dudes, and maybe 100 plus fighters, it's going to be a bad situation. So we had to sneak in this area, get this one guy, and sneak out without alerting the bad guys. And so after that full brief, we all just looked at each other like, what are we waiting for? Why are we sitting here talking about it? Let's go, let's get after it. And that moment is imprinted on me, because that's what I loved about the job. I love the idea of the fact that I had guys to my right, guys to my left, who were just all about going into the hairiest situations, no fear. If there was fear, it was healthy fear, and, just going and getting the job done, and ensuring that the guy to his right and his left and my right and my left came back home, because at the end of the day, that's what it was all about for me. I didn't care so much about my life. I cared about the life of the guy to my right and my left. So.
Well, there's clearly such camaraderie and brotherhood in the SEALs. Did you ever, within all of that, experience any type of racism in the military?
I never personally experienced any racism, at least none that was so overt that I could be like, wow, like that was racist. You know what I mean? So honestly, I can't say that I have made. Yeah, I honestly can't say that.
So you come out of the SEALs, you're doing your own thing, and then all of a sudden you get an interesting phone call that says, "Go west, young man." What was that about?
Yeah, I I got out and I was trying to figure out, you know, what to do with my life. I thought I was going to go into speaking and was doing work in ministry. So I figured I'd go into ministry and you know, that stuff kind of wasn't working out as I expected. And then I started applying for a government job that was in the realm of the job that I did in the SEAL teams. And like I went through the process, and like towards the end of the process, well, I would say about 3 weeks into the process, I stopped hearing from the recruiter. So I figured maybe he found something in my record I didn't qualify. And then 2 weeks later, I'm in grad school, finishing up my master's, and that's when my phone, and it was somebody from Hollywood who worked for, directed by Michael Bay, and this woman is looking for somebody to help out on a project.
It's just Michael Bay, not a big deal, you know. Yeah. Michael Bay calls up and says, you know, hey, is Remi available to come help out on a movie set?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't quite like that with him directly. It was a lady who was calling because she was looking for SEALs with my background and with my availability to be able to work on Transformers, which was the project. And I said, sure. You know, I was in grad school, I had flexibility, and that's kind of how it all happened. And then, you know, working on that project has led to other projects as it relates to consulting, and then, you know, consulting began to morph into writing, and then, you know, now I'm here doing what I'm doing now. I still do. I was just working on a TV show for Apple before COVID hit. We were out in Morocco shooting. I was doing some consulting on that, but you know, now I've kind of morphed into more of a writer. You know.
But you were acting. You were in what were some of the bigger movies that you were in that we know about?
Yeah, so I had a role in Transformers. I had a really, really small role in Six Underground, which just came out on Netflix with Ryan Reynolds. That came out in December. I did all the consulting on that project. And then I've done 2 commercials with Peter Berg, and who's a great dude, by the way. And
great guy. Bumped into him a bunch over the years. An LA boxer guy. I mean, he's
a
lot tougher.
Yeah.
And he directed that movie with Marcus Luttrell, Lone Survivor.
Yeah, Lone Survivor. Yeah.
So he's got some background there. I remember him saying in an interview one time that going back in life, if he had it to do over again, he would consider maybe trying out for the SEALs. So you guys have clearly rubbed off on Peter Berg. You have a unique position in that, or perspective, in that you're a Navy SEAL. You have sacrificed. You have done more than 99.99999% will ever even imagine doing for America. And right now, man, you look out the window over the last, you know, week and a half, and the streets are covered, protests everywhere, riots and looting. But with everything that happened with George Floyd, we have to talk about that from your perspective. What went through your mind the first time you saw that video of George Floyd helplessly on the ground and a law enforcement officer with his knee in his neck?
The first time I saw it was on the news, because the news showed a part of it. And then I went to go look it up, and I was horrified. I was just like, I was angry, you know, I was frustrated, because I had just posted about Ahmaud Arbery's death like a few weeks earlier, you know? So, you know, for that to happen, you know, and I was outraged about that especially when I saw that video, and I had no problem sharing my outrage as it relates to that. And Attila Jefferson as well, and all the other, you know, Blacks who've been unjustly, you know, unfairly, untimely killed by police officers. And so when that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And I think that's the straw that broke the camel's back, not just for me, but for everybody. But I was just horrified. It was horrible. I mean, just every part of it was horrible, from the time limit, from the time how much time that dude was on George's neck, from the police officers standing around and not doing anything. It was horrifying.
So what are the ages of your 3 sons?
6, 5, and 1. The first thing that goes through my mind is I have to be an agent of change. That's, you know, the type of person I am. When I see a problem, I need to figure out a solution. So when I see that what happened to George and the others, I need to do something to fix this now. I need to speak out. I need to go on interviews. I flew to Dallas yesterday on my own dime to go kind of do a panel discussion with some really big influencers as it relates to the topic. And that's what goes through our mind. I need to stop it and before it continues and my kids potentially get affected in some way. Because it may not be a police officer, it may be like what happened with Ahmaud Arbery. It might be just two racist dudes, or it may not be they get shot or killed. It may be, they get falsely arrested like I did I tell a story in the book how I was falsely arrested for no reason, thrown in jail when there were, white people around me doing the exact same thing, So my stance is I need to do something in an effort to initiate change. I think that one of the first steps towards change is understanding, because there's just so many people who they don't understand. They don't want to understand. They're just like, well, why are black people complaining? Well, there is no racism. I'm just like, come on, dude. Like, can you really say that with a straight face? Like, and I don't point to every single situation as racism. Like, oh, this dude stepped on my foot, he's a racist. Oh, this person cut me off, he's a racist. No, I think sometimes there are people who loosely throw that term around, but sometimes it may not be racism. It may be implicit bias. That's something that needs to be dealt with. It may be the lack of diversity. That's something that needs to be dealt with in this country. So,
I think
I'm trying to be an agent of change.
With George Floyd, I think for the first time, besides everything that all the names that you've mentioned, all of the cases, and they go back so much longer, and so many we'll never even know about because there was no video. Yeah. But for me,
but this is, sorry to cut you off. This, because I was having this conversation yesterday. This goes back hundreds of years, and there's some people like, oh, why do you always have to bring this up? No, because this added to the body count from slavery. Like, because I had somebody that tried to bring up a statistic the other day and say, well. I can't remember the exact number, so don't misquote me on this. I can't remember the exact number. I can't remember what year they were referencing, but they said something along the lines of, where only 9, black guys were killed by, black unarmed guys were killed by police officers in whatever year. I can't remember what year maybe it was 2019 or whatever. And my thing, and he's like, so why are you complaining about it? It's like, listen, dude, like one is enough. Like one is enough.
I don't think that statistic is even accurate, but I don't know. Yeah. That sounds crazy low.
But my stance is one is enough, and that one has been added to probably millions, right? So that's why there's anger. That's why there's frustration. Yeah. That's why
I think too that the video is so irrefutable and so shocking in the George Floyd case, and it is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's real. That I think it's almost created this litmus test. No matter what you are, black, white, blue, yellow, orange, purple, Martian, doesn't matter. If you look at that video, if you can even make it through without looking away, which is hard enough, that's the litmus test. If you cannot say that there is something evil and diabolically wrong and racist about that individual's behavior for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that evil stare, the viciousness, I think that becomes a litmus test and why you're hearing people like, John Elway, Tim Cook of Apple, Dana White of the UFC, people who don't necessarily sit on the same aisle of anything are coming out and saying, hey man, there is no debate. This is effed up. We got a problem. We got to do something. And then you still have a handful of those fringe people say, well, who knows what that guy was doing before? I don't give a shit what he was doing beforehand. First of all, he was buying a pack of cigarettes with a $20 bill. But I mean, if someone was robbing a bank, you don't stick your knee in their neck when they're unconscious.
And the interesting thing is there's so many people, and this has been the shocking thing to me. Like I was asked this question the other day, why are you saying that the guy was racist? Why can't it just be that he was just a bad cop and he was untrained and he had issues? Why do black people, white people, why do people have to say that it's because he was racist? And I was just like, are you serious, man? Like, look at the evidence. Like, yes, it wasn't racist from the perspective of this dude was driving around saying, hey, I'm looking for a black dude to kill. But it was racist in the undertone. There was a racial element. And I asked somebody yesterday, I said, do you think that if that dude was white, the same thing would happen? If George Floyd was white, the same thing would happen? Probably not. There were black people who were holding up the camera the cell phone, and they were begging this white cop to stop.
And what would have happened? Here's what I've said to other people too.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't any of the bystanders rush in? It sounds cold because maybe someone could
They would've
have
got
saved
killed.
his Mr. Floyd's life, but in reality, then the cops would have opened fire most likely, and it would have been a massacre. And then the narrative could have been, look, this guy was just trying to arrest. This cop was just trying to arrest a guy, and 15 black people rushed him, so he did what he had to do.
Exactly.
So it's such a crazy, effed up scenario. I respect the fact that when I asked you before, did you experience any racism in the Navy SEALs? And again, there's a group of 1% of all Navy SEALs are black. And if there's ever a statistic of being the odd man out where, you might feel or experience racism, and you said, no, I didn't. And that was your honest experience. You're telling it like you
but
said.
I've experienced a whole lot of racism in my life. You know what I mean? I've experienced a whole lot of racism in my life. And this is something I was telling somebody yesterday when they were questioning whether the police officer who killed George was racist. And I was just like, listen, man, I said, when I was a kid, going into the train station, and there was a guy who jumped the turnstile, and white cops beat the brakes off of him for jumping the turnstile. Dude was just like beat him down. And then the cop looks at me and says, you better keep going. You better keep moving, and you're next. And I see things like that happen in the Bronx all the time. I know what that looks like. You know what I mean? I know what it looks like to go into a department store and people are following me and as though I'm going to steal something. I've had that happen in this very neighborhood I live in after I got out the military. I served this country for 13 years, and I go somewhere and I'm being suspected I'm going to be a thief. I'm going to say, I know what that looks like. Yeah. And I have so many other stories. I'll tell you this one story that wasn't in the book, but, I share this in a different format. But there's a restaurant here in California. It's not here any longer. And me and my friend, we were in buds at the time. And we went into that restaurant and we sat down and we ordered, the waitress came and we ordered our food. And right after we ordered our food, and there's people all around us. And as a matter of fact, there was a couple right next to us who had just finished eating their food, and another waitress went up to that couple and gave them their check. And the couple paid as we're placing our order. Right after we placed our order, the waitress says to me and my buddy, is that all you want? And we said, yeah. She said, okay, I'll be right back to give you the check. And we looked at each other like, give us the check. We just ordered the food. And then she goes and she comes back with the check and she gives us the check. And me and my boy look at each other. We're just like, what is going on? And she said, well, people have been walking out on their checks lately and not paying their checks. And so, if we feel like somebody may not pay, and this is what her manager later explained, because we kind of said we're not paying until we eat our food. The manager came and told us, well, long story short, what came out of it was up to the waiters and waitresses to decide whose check, who was going to pay up front and who was going to pay at the end, because people have been walking out. And if we were the guys that were going to walk out and she didn't get the responsibility will fall on her. And long story, what came out of that was she cried and walked away, and she kept on saying, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist.
Might not be aware that she is, but
exactly.
You don't have to be aware of something to be it.
There's a white couple next to us who are paying for their food after they ate. We just ordered our food, and we're being profiled and told to pay now. Is there not a level of racism in there?
You've risked your life. You've been shot at. You served in military intelligence while in the SEAL. So you've had access and been trusted with secrets by the U.S. government on the highest level, things that you will never be able to speak about to others, that you have to take to your grave, matters of national security in your role. You've been trusted with that, with men's lives, with so much. But when people don't see that uniform on you, when they don't have that buildup today, now that you're not in the SEALs, you're a dude walking in with a backwards baseball cap. You got tattoos.
There's a moment of anger that rises up within me because of the fact that, I served this country. But then again, like I said earlier, it transposes into this concept of I need to do something. Because like, what am I going to do? Curse that person out? Yeah, I'm gonna prove them. I'm gonna prove their stereotype of me right if I flip out. Like if I'm that angry black man. So it's like, what do I do? And the best thing that I could do at times is come back to this office and create stories or speak or create messages that's going to be agents of transformation. You know, so that's all I can really, and support, you know, and support what I believe is going to help, you know, create change in this country. Like, you know, I got the question the other day, do I support Colin Kaepernick? And I'm like, absolutely, I support Colin Kaepernick. I support his right to kneel. As a matter of fact, you know, when I went and did the job that I did it so that he could kneel, so that he could protest freely, so that this black man could do what he does and fight against injustice, right? And so, you know, it kills me sometimes when people, and a lot of people don't even know this, but it was a white Army Green Beret who gave Colin Kaepernick the idea to kneel.
Glad you brought that up because, yeah, it's 100% true.
And so it kills me when people are just like that. It's not disrespectful. I don't see it as disrespectful. What I see as disrespectful is you telling me that this black man who put on a uniform and went and did what I did so that everybody in this country, black, white, Hispanic, whoever you are, can have the freedoms that you have. This black man can go overseas and do what I did, but this black man can't support a black man who's kneeling in protest, you know, for inequality. It kills me. I don't see it as unpatriotic. You know, I'm patriotic. I don't see that act as unpatriotic, but I'm supposed to be a good old boy. And that's the thing, another thing that kills me, because I get so many people that are just like, especially recently on social media, Remi, why are you speaking out? Like, there's no racism, there's no this, there's no that. Like, America is great and all this other stuff. And you know, and I'm just like, they're angry that I'm speaking out. It's just like, you didn't have a problem when I was, you know.
Hey, man, listen, if you want to play both sides of the fence in life, there's a word for it. It's called being a pussy. And, you know, every time we pick a different topic, someone comes to me and says, man, you're going to piss off this brand. You're going to piss off this side. That, I said, you know, fuck it. If we're not talking about stuff that isn't going to piss someone off, then why would anyone be watching? We did a topic on guns, and I talked about, you know, that I own guns and believe very much in the Second Amendment. Got a bunch of texts and emails about that. Screw you, do this. You believe this. The hell's wrong with you? You do a topic about being in favor of the protests going on. Man, that pisses people. You can't, no matter what side. No, and at the end of the day, you got to be straight. You got to be authentic and consistent. Last thing I want to ask you before we lose you, and your time's been very much appreciated, with your three sons, because I've been asking myself this with my own son these days. What do you tell them even now at their young age? What do you think you'll tell them as they get older? Because you can't always be there. And that's something I've come to learn and been told. I won't always be there. So as much as I'm comfortable and would protect him, certainly you would protect your children and have the ability. What would you say to them about what they should do when they're out being black men, black boys, black youth?
You know, right now it's hard for me to ask that, to tell them, because they're just so young. What I try to do is I try to teach by example more so than anything. So when we are out in places like, hey, you know, be aware of your surroundings, be aware of your hands, don't touch anything you're not supposed to touch. Don't talk to anybody you're not supposed to talk to. And I try to model that, you know what I mean? Like if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody, I try to make sure somebody on the street who I don't know, I try to make sure I initiate that conversation in a respectful, calming way, you know, so that they see that. So a lot of the things that I teach them is not necessarily through words, it's through actions. You know, the way I carry myself, the way I carry myself when the cops drive by, you know, the way I carry myself when I'm in a place with security guards and a bunch of people around. It's just, I allow them to see me. And there's times when I tell them, hey kids, watch me, watch how that is, watch how that is, right? Now, what will I say to them as they get older, once they're able to grasp the concepts in a verbal form, is, you know, never give anybody an excuse. This is something my mother would tell me. Never give anybody an excuse to reason in their mind as to why what happened to you happened. And so, boys, you black men in this country, don't give anybody an excuse. Make sure you're walking upright. Make sure you're not blasting your music obnoxiously as you're down the street. Make sure that you're being cautious of where your hands are. When you're, if you get pulled over by the police, or you get pulled over by a rent-a-cop. What I mean? Like, whatever you do, make sure you don't give anybody excuse. If you have to be extra, and it sucks, but if you have to be extra polite, if you have to be extra respectful in order to ensure that you walk away from the situation alive, that's what you do.
So you feel that you will absolutely need to teach your son specifically, because you are Black. You have to be extra cautious than your white friends when you're out and about in public if you're interacting with the police.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, yeah, I do. It's just hopefully by the time you're 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, I won't have to have that conversation. But right now, the state we're in, it's not just the police, man. It's, and that I was, as it relates to Black Lives Matter, like I'm really for that movement. I don't know a whole lot about the organization, but I'm for the movement. And because the truth is, Black Lives Matter, Black stories matter, Black education matters, Black justice matters, Black fill in the blank, it all matters. And I say that to say with my kids, it's not just about who you are as it relates to the police. It's about who you are when you go for an interview for a job. You know what I mean? Because you're gonna be looked at, possibly differently. Just look at Hollywood. There's not a lot of diversity. I mean, the Hollywood, who's that's really, really for diversity. When you really look at it, when you really look at the executive levels and the top positions, and you begin to work your way down, even the directors, there's not a lot of diversity, for the most part, right? So, what I'm going to tell my kids is, hey, it's not just about how you handle yourself and how you're careful around police. It's about how you're around. You carry yourself around everybody. You know what I mean? So,
hopefully there will be a time where that doesn't have to be the discussion, but I agree with you. Right now, that's a absolute factor in life and death right now for our kids.
And the crazy thing to me is there's people who will hear that statement and be like, "What are you talking about? There is no color." People are like, "What?"
Imagine being a white dude who looks like me with a Black kid making that statement. You could see I'm like making friends left and right. But, like I said, fuck it. If people don't realize at this point that we have a real problems and it's taking people's lives, then, those aren't the people I'm going to concern myself with at this point. We got bigger issues and more important people. Remi, you are a freaking incredible person. Again, I still have a hard time grasping your story. It's absolutely crazy. I did order your book. I downloaded it on Kindle, made it most of the way through. Can't wait to get the hard copy. And I went on YouTube and saw tons of crazy stuff about you, which is interesting and exciting. But the book is transformed. We're going to put it up on the screen. And the hard copy book shows up at my door in 2 days. I'm starting the book on page 1, and I can't wait to read it. You are beyond inspirational. And thank you again for your service in the Navy SEALs and all you've done for America.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for having me on the show.